Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video. And in this video, we're going to continue building our rocket. And the rocket that we're building, kind of as I mentioned in the first video, is sort of a hello world example. We're not really trying to make anything that's really good. I just simply don't have the skill set to do that. I don't know at this point how to make textures or how to do coding so that we can have, instruments and other things like that. So we're just kind of building a basic rocket here, and we'll just improve it over time. Hopefully someday maybe I can learn how to make textures for it, and we'll do a video on that as well. Now, I just wanted to show here quickly that I did fix the offset in between videos. You can see now that the rocket sits perfectly on the center of the pad. So inside of Gmax, this is what it looks like. Before, when I had when I rotated the rocket, I forgot that basically the front becomes the top. And since the front is the top, then this is no longer the ground. So you can drag your rocket, here to where normally, looking at it from this perspective, this would be the ground. So anything below that line, actually, I'm sorry, I forgot to switch my camera. Anything below this line would be below the ground normally. But since the XYZ isn't the same in Orbiter as it is in Gmax, then we have these sort of strange orientations that we have to remember. Okay, so what I want to do first of all is I want to just give life to the rocket. Then we're going to kind of come back here maybe into Gmax and work on the design a little bit more, because I think there's still some improvements that we can do. All right, let's go into Orbiter and exit out of Orbiter. And we're going to bring up our config file, rocket 4A. And the only thing that we really have to add here to give it, to bring it to life, is we need to change some of these different settings. We need to give it, some thrust, because currently it's set to thrust 0. And again, that's because this is a copy of the Carina space probe. And of course, that little space probe didn't have any thrust. So that's set to 0. So we just need to give it some thrust. And we're going to say that this rocket doesn't have any retro engines. So we'll just leave that to 0. And since it's a vertical rocket, we're going to say that it doesn't have hover engines either. So we will leave that to 0. But how do we decide what we want the main thrust to be? Well, realistically, for this type of rocket, I really don't have a good answer for that yet. What I'm going to do is just borrow the data out of the XR2 flight manual, and we're going to give it the same thrust that the XR2 has. So this middle column here is the XR2. This is the XR1. This is the XR2. So we're just going to scroll down the list, and we're going to say that our rocket has, before we get into thrust, we need to decide mass. We're going to say that our rocket has the same mass as the XR2. So let's tab over. That's 16,080. So what is the mass of the empty rocket? 16,080. And how much fuel can it carry? The XR2 can carry 13,396. So we're going to go with that. That might be ridiculously too high. I actually did calculate the volume in between videos. It is... I closed out the tab, so never mind. But I went to a simple website that had a calculator for, taking the radius times the height, or whatever exactly the calculation is, and it could calculate the volume, and it was something like 61,000 metric meters, and I don't know exactly how that converts to a fuel mass. We'll have to figure that out at some point as well if we want our rocket to be realistic. But for now, just to give our hello world rocket some life, we're going to just borrow this number, 13,396. So the max fuel is 13,396. Now the engine ISP, for the standard Delta glider is 40,000. And I think we'll go ahead and use that number for our first rocket here. That way we have really efficient engines. The default for the XR2 is much lower than 40,000. It's here somewhere. Where does it give the ISP? And I'm not seeing it immediately, but it's in this list somewhere. You get the engine ISP. I think it's like 29,000 or something for the XR2. Okay, so what else do we need to know? We need to know max thrust. And I actually don't know a darn thing about kilonewtons. So I don't even, at least the engine ISP, I kind of have a vague idea of what that is because, I know the Delta glider is 40,000 and I know the XR2 is, much less than that, especially if you run it in expert mode. And I can basically wrap my head around mass. Obviously, it's just mass and fuel. But kilonewtons, I don't have a darn idea what that is. But for the max engine thrust here, main engine, we could use this number, which is what the XR2 has for its main engines. If we wanted to maybe be a little bit more conservative, we could go down to the hover engine thrust. This is how powerful the hover engines are, which are still quite powerful. But for our first example rocket, we'll go with the main engine, so 605 kilonewtons, and I believe you just have to write that in as 605,000 because K is 1,000. And again, we're not going to have any retros. We're not going to have any hover. Max attitude thrust. I don't know really what that means. Center of gravity shift over ground. I don't really know what that should be set to. Camera offset. I'm guessing this is like when you get inside the cockpit, this should determine like the height of the camera or something. And I haven't quite figured out what the formula is here, what these numbers mean. I mean, this is undoubtedly X, Y, and Z. But as far as how to tell it that I want the camera to be at 135 meters or something off the ground, I don't really know which one of these I need to edit yet. It may just be as simple as taking that number and putting in, 135, but I'll figure that out later. Touchdown points we already covered. CW, I don't remember what that is. I'll have to look it up again. Lift factor. We don't have any wings, so I'm assuming our lift factor is going to be 0 like the Carina. Cross section, this probably needs to be edited so that it's more representative of, let me take a sip of water. So that it's more representative of our rocket. This is the cross section of the Carina. And I guess that's like maybe 2.45 meters, wide and 6.25 meters in length or something. I don't really know. I have to work that out. I have to figure that part out as well. But that's actually all we have to do to give life to our rocket is just that part. So let's save it and let's open the rocket in orbiter. We'll move the rocket back to Cape Canaveral, put it on the launch pad, and we'll just kind of see. We won't necessarily bother with a full ride to orbit. That's like 11 or 12 minutes, and we don't need to spend all that time. We just want to see if it works. Okay, so let's edit the rocket, or scenario editor rather. Edit, and put the location for Earth. And we want it to be Cape Canaveral landing pad 1 is fine. And again, here you can see that it's, centered, whereas before it was kind of sitting kind of up here or something, and that's because of the position that we had it at in the editor. And speaking of that position, you'll notice that this rocket pretty much sits flush with the ground. I think there might be like 1 pixel or 2 pixels in there. If you want to have the rocket sitting on a launch pad, I don't know. Let me actually, if we want, we could move it over to launch pad 30, whatever that is, but I'm not going to bother. But if I did, you would see what would happen would be that the rocket the launch pad would be like up here, and the rocket would sort of be sitting inside of it. So if you want to have your rocket on the launch pad, you'd want to actually have it in Gmax to where this part, and again, from this orientation, this is the ground. This black line here is the ground. So we would actually want to move our rocket out that way by, 40, 50, 60 pixels or something like that. That way, from this perspective, if we did that, the rocket would be floating in the air. But over there on the launch pad, it would be sitting on the pad. Let's make sure we have the rocket selected. So F3, rocket 4A. Let's get inside. And let's bring up burn time calculator to make sure that we have a propellant of some sort. And according to this one, we don't. So somehow we did not give the rocket life. All right. Good to know. Actually, I think I know why. I think it's because I started from this, from the current state rather than starting a new, spawning a new rocket. So let me spawn a new rocket. I think that's why that's saying that there's no propellant. If not, then there's something in the configuration file that I missed, and I'll go back and check that. Okay, scenario editor. New rocket 4A. And my rockets, and that I just made that folder inside of the vessels folder just to have everything conveniently put into one place. And set input focus, create. And before we bother putting it on the pad, I can actually get inside the rocket and just bring up BTC. Okay, yeah, we've got our Delta V. So yeah, we do have power for this rocket. So let's go ahead and go to location and put it at Cape Canaveral. The reason we didn't have power before is because, again, I had already spawned the rocket in the old state before I had given it any propellant or anything. Then instead of launching a new scenario, I launched from the current state, which is a save file basically, and that save file had the old rocket, so we needed to start new. Okay, so we're done there, close, and let's just look outside so we can see how we are. And again, you can see inside when we look at our camera view, we're looking straight up to the sky, which is fine, but we're at an altitude of 1 meter, and that's where I think this camera angle comes into play. And I don't know which one of these. We can actually play with that real quick, just out of curiosity. Let's set the center one to 135, hit save. Now, just out of curiosity, reload. And I think that, I don't know if that'll reread that config file or not. I guess it doesn't, because before, yeah, I actually don't think that's going to reread the config file. So just out of curiosity, let me spawn another rocket. Go new. I'm going to go rocket 4A2. My rockets. And we'll put this one also on Cape Canaveral. Launchpad 2. Done, close. And rotate the camera, something that makes sense. I do wish the camera would default to a better camera position. All right, let's get inside of rocket 2A. And now we're still on the ground. So one of those 3 positions probably edits the height, but who knows which one it is. Let's do that. Hopefully you don't mind me figuring this out here. Again, this is a learn with me style video. So let's spawn another rocket. Scenario editor. And we can delete 4A for now. Create rocket 4A. Now that that name is free. Create, and we'll put this one on the ground. And the very fact that I'm now 135 meters away from the rocket makes me think that that camera angle at least has something to do with it. because before, every time I'd spawn a rocket, I was looking at the, you know, the very back part of it. Okay, now let's select that rocket and jump inside. And then we're still on the ground. Okay, so it must be that first one then. That's where the camera's at. I'll check that out later. All right, so according to burn time calculator, we have 24 kilometers per second with our rocket, which is pretty ridiculous. But let's go ahead and break open the champagne bottle or whatever onto the coronation, I guess it's called. And let's launch. And look at that. We are up and going. Of course, we don't have any thrust. That's also something we can define in the configuration. But as you can see, we created a rocket, or we created a mesh in 3D Max. We exported it, and we're now flying our creation. I think that's pretty cool. Now you can imagine, you know, if we had a texture down the side, and we had a fairing that would separate, and we had some, you know, some rocket plume, it would be pretty neat. And this is a whole lot more delta V than we need to get to orbit. Let's just for the fun of it, let's go ahead and take this to orbit, but we'll do it the fast way. We'll use some time warp. Let's go ahead and pitch over now. We are way up out of the atmosphere. We got all the altitude that we need. I should have pitched over much sooner, but again, you know, we're just flying our brand new rocket for the first time, so we're allowed to make some mistakes here. And there we have it. You know, that's our rocket. Could imagine maybe if we cut this part in half and said that this would be stage 2 or possibly 3, and then we add a wider part down here for stage 1. All right, well, that's actually good enough. We're in space. We don't need to take the time to bring it all the way up to orbital velocity. But that's what our rocket looks like. And I will be interested in figuring out how I can at least animate the fairing separation. What I'll have to do in Gmax is cut the fairing in half. So we'll make that, you know, we'll make it 2 parts. So you have left fairing and right fairing, and I think that's going to be pretty easy to do. Okay, let's exit out of orbiter. I'm going to take a sip of water. And let's get back into Gmax, and let's just maybe spend a couple minutes seeing if we can refine the look of our rocket a little bit. So let's rotate it. Okay, now it's standing up right now. We just need to move it into position. So we'll move from the top here. That's rotating it. That's not what I want. Click that one. Move it. That's not what I want. And not what I want. I want this to come. Okay, not what I want. All right. Sometimes it takes me a minute just to remember how to move the darn thing. Okay, so this is the front view. Let's highlight both pieces, and we want to move the whole thing up. Oh, I want the move tool, that's why. There we go. Now again, from this perspective, this is the ground. And it's not really centered here, but that's not really important at the moment. Yeah, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, now what I've got an idea to do is to make this part stage 2, basically. So we can do that, I think, by, let's see, I want to resize. I just want to change the height. And I guess there's probably a resize tool here. I mean, obviously I can just edit the height here, but I'm curious if there's like a quick resize mirror selection. That'll come in handy when I want to cut the fairing in half and just have half and half of fairing. Okay, I don't see like if I just want to resize, I'm not sure how to do that, so I'm just going to do it here. And we'll cut the height down to 60 meters. Okay, now we'll move this whole piece up here. And let me zoom in a bit, because remember we had like a couple pixels there where it was transparent. But if I put this to where the fairing kind of has a ring around it, then in theory we shouldn't have any of those odd pixels. And it looks to me like the fairing's a bit off. So let me move this. About like that. I think that's closer, if not perfect. It's not perfect, but it's closer. Yeah, about like that. Okay, so I'm going to say that's going to be like the stage 2 part. And we might want to move all that up. And let's build a third stage. And we'll do that with, start with a cylinder. I should say not a third stage, but a first stage. So we'll start with a cylinder. And again, that works best in the top view. And I don't really know how wide to make that. This was, I forgot how big that was. So we'll just kind of start with something. It doesn't really matter. You can modify it. So start with something and then move it into position here. Obviously, that's not what we're going to go with. And now edit this object by coming over to modify and then just start dialing the radius down to something that makes more sense. I think this was 12, so it was 6 and 6. So let's make the bottom part. Let's see if 24 is too big. Yeah, I'd say that's too big. Let's go to 18. So just that will probably look a little bit better. And height-wise, that's really tall. That's crazy tall. So let's cut that in half. So now we've got 100 plus 60, so that's 160 meters plus the fairing. That's still pretty tall, actually. Okay, now let me get this part centered. Now we'll move the whole thing down, or we'll move the top part down. And that's weird that that's way over there. Let me move this piece. Click that arrow and drag it over so that it's underneath of the object. Okay, there we go. Now we'll add some like that there. So we just need a line, but we need to kind of get things centered a bit better. It's a bit off. So highlight these pieces, click here, and that's centered. So now if we center this part below, and I would say that's centered. And this still might be a bit too wide. Let's narrow that up a bit. Let's go with 15 meters. And maybe we need to recenter that. No, I think that's okay. All right, now let's draw a line between here and here and here, or rather between here and here. Then we'll do a lathe on it to make it go around the whole outside. And let's zoom in. Guess I'm already at maximum zoom, so let's See if we can get the line where it needs to be. There to there. And again, hit escape to get rid of the hanging piece. Now when we lathe that line, oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, it wouldn't go around the outer edge. It would just go there. Okay, that makes sense, but yeah, not what I was expecting to have happen. So what we might need to do then is to lathe it. Let me think about that. So line, vertex, maybe into here, or possibly into here and up. Something like that. Let's see what that looks like. No, that's like exactly opposite of what we need. So let's try it the other way. So Control Z, and let's move this vertex. Like that, and let's lay that. Okay, that's basically what we need, but it's not where it's not positioned where it should be. It's okay, fixing position is easy. So something like that. And now we just need to make this needs to go up a bit, and it needs to be a bit wider. So vertex, move the vertex up, and this needs to come out a bit. Yeah, something like that. You can see over here in the perspective. And then we'll basically just sit this part down so that it's kind of flush. Because right now there's still kind of that gap there that looks weird. Okay, so let's, first of all, things feel a bit off center. I guess I'm not going to worry too much about the centering just yet. But let's highlight these two pieces and move them down as one piece. Got the wrong one selected though. And let me see. I notice every time you click like one of these that it highlights up here. I wonder if you can just press X, Y, and Z for that. Okay, no. So there must be hotkeys for these. I just have to figure out what they are. So instead of clicking, you know, that for Y, there's got to be a hotkey to get to that. Maybe it's like 1, 2, and 3 or something. I don't know, I'll figure that out later. Okay, so we've got these two sections, and we want the Y, and we're just going to kind of move them down until it sort of sits. Here you can see in this perspective that it looks like that's mounted to that. But I think we kind of want more, you know, that's awfully flat. So let's move this up. And let's go back to here and let's click on the vertex. And let's click that line and let's actually move it out a bit like that so it's not so steep. And let's see what that looks like on the lathe. That's better. But it looks to me like this part is off. So let's click on one of these other perspectives. Yeah, it's off there. So let's click here and move the whole thing over so that it's kind of, you know, right on the rocket. And there's a bit of a lip on either side, and I don't think that's right. So let's click that section, go to vertex. I keep saying veer. I can't see it from that perspective, so zoom way in here. Yeah, it's off. So we'll click that. And we'll just drag it in so it's right on the edge. And down so that it touches the rocket. Now that should be a perfect connection there. So lathe. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay. All right, we're at 30 minutes at this point in the video, and I'll go ahead and wrap it up here then. If you like this part of the video, please do hit the like button down below. And if you like the idea of kind of working with meshes and watching me sort of through this learning process, because again, I don't know hardly anything about this stuff. And I'm just learning, I'm brand new. I just found this, I just started using this program yesterday, and I've already learned a whole lot about it. So if you like watching the learning experience, leave some comments down below to let me know what you think. And I will see you in the next video.